Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Modern Yoga Talks. I have Codrington Barzey here, a good friend of mine, a yoga practitioner and a friend. So, Cod, tell people who you are for those who doesn't know you.
Yeah. So my name's Codrington Barzey. I am, I guess, an engineer by trade, but I consider myself pretty entrepreneurial. I've been doing yoga in the studio for about 3 years. I think it was 2022, the end of 2022, when I first walked into Jules' studio in Cocoa Beach, and I've been practicing pretty regularly since then.
I'd like give us an insight or experience as a yoga practitioner at 2022. We're still kind of dancing around pandemic around that time,
Yeah,
weren't we?
yes,
I think we
yeah.
were.
I think we were kind of returning to normal by the end of 2022.
Slowly, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So, kind of giving it a little bit of insight about your journey, what brought you to yoga, and were you having your own personal practice before coming into a studio?
Yeah, so I was like going through an interesting time, I guess, in my life, and I would say like things were kind of falling apart, and I was doing yoga at home and like trying to meditate. I was kind of trying like a lot of different things to try to get my headspace, I guess, together. And a lot of things going on. I was in therapy doing just a bunch of different things, and it was like, okay, I was definitely becoming more and more isolated. So like I was doing my own practice at home, kind of watching YouTube videos, things like that. But I was definitely very isolated in the practice. And so, I was like, okay, let me become less isolated and let me try to find a community, uh, to practice with together, like hopefully a community of like-minded people who I can practice with. And so, I tried out a couple of studios before I ended up, at Yoga Bliss.
Okay, so when you were practicing online, who were you watching? Who were
It
you
was just like
practicing with?
random. Honestly, it was like whatever came up next. It wasn't like any one person specific. Like it was just like whoever
Okay,
popped up.
okay. So just to get a little bit of understanding about your background, obviously you don't have to say anything that you don't feel like
Mhm.
sharing, but just kind of give us an understanding of what life like for you when you were growing
Mhm.
up and as as a male person in this
Yeah.
society and all those things. Like kind of just give us a little bit of background, who you
Mhm.
are, what kind of, your personality and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah. So I grew up in Boston, specifically Dorchester, Mass. I would, inner city kid. Uh, let's see. I would say my story probably replicates it was probably similar to a lot of people. My parents were divorced when I was young, and I dealt with kind of a lot of interesting, uh, I guess, family throughout the years. There was a lot of death in my family growing up in the city. There's a lot of death around me, period. A lot of gang violence, a lot of just nonsense growing up. And my grandparents had a house down here, so I grew up a lot. Like any summer breaks and whatnot was coming to Florida, especially Palm Bay, Florida. So like any time I could get away from the city, it was coming down here. I just loved how peaceful it was down here. Uh, but anyways, so I always said to myself, like, the soonest I can get out of this city, like I'm getting out of here and I just don't want to be here. I just didn't like it. And I decided to use school, honestly, was kind of my exit ticket. And so I, became very studious. I was always good kind of at the math and sciences, really into STEM. And I really kind of like early on, I would say at a young age, especially like when there was a lot, like when things between, going from my living with my mother to then living with my father to then honestly living with my grandmother. There wasn't like much stability growing up, I would say, in terms of like households that I was in. But I kind of was like always like just figuring it out. And so eventually, like, I went to college and transferred a few times until I made it down here to Florida, and I ended up staying down here after. So mm, yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. So for being um male in a female dominated
Mhm.
practice, yoga,
Yeah.
how was that experience for you? Did you feel uncomfortable or did you feel empowered? Did you feel any kind of, like, did you feel a little nervous coming into a studio setting? because of that, or that didn't affect you at all?
No, that never affected me. Growing up, I always had like a lot of female friends. So like, I don't know, like I didn't really care that it was, if I was the only guy in the room or whatever, like it was just like, whatever, like I'm not here. Like I always went for me. Like I didn't really care who was in the room. If it was just me and the teacher, or if it was me and 100 women, it was like, I don't really care. This isn't the place for me to, like, I'm not here for anybody else other than for me to really connect with myself. And so I didn't care who was in the room.
I like that. I like that a lot. So, Codrington, very grounded person here. So, just a little bit of background. So, Codrington, as he mentioned, we met at my old yoga studio in Cocoa Beach, and he regularly came to my classes, and we became friends. And even without the studio, we stayed connected. And so, just so everyone has a little bit of background, and we always have a lot of talks like this. It's always like a TED talk
Yeah.
when we're talking. So we always talk about life, the societal situation. And in this particular episode, we want to talk about a little bit more about men and the stigma and anxiety and all the things that we don't want to talk about when it comes to men. Codrington and I would always talk about, like, women like to say, oh, we want a sensitive man, but we don't really create space for that to happen. So not that everyone doesn't, but it's a hard thing to break, right? So with practicing yoga, do you think it helped you understand the practice, especially when you are practicing at home by yourself and you felt isolated, and then coming to a community? Were there any misconceptions that you had and then gave you a little bit of clarity once you were in the community, or you were pretty set? You understood what it is and you kind of understand the industry as far as the practice
No, yeah,
and the
I didn't
business of it.
understand. I didn't understand at all. It was really just like an exploration, honestly. It was like I'm just gonna try it and see like what feels right, sort of was like the thing where I was going. So like I said, like I think you were like the third or fourth studio I went like in the area. And like as soon as I walked in, it was very like this feels right. Like this like I love the personality. I love like how inviting it was, like how calming it was. Like I liked how like small and kind of like just like I don't know how to say it. I was like, yeah, like
Homey.
foamy, right? It was very like just it was so comfortable. Like it was like this is this is such a peaceful place. To me anyways. Like it was very peaceful to me. And so like when I went in, it was just like I'm just looking for some place that I feel like, that I feel like I would want to go to every week regularly and know that like this is where I can go to just, unwind and just, kind of just be. So
So I want to talk about that because you said it was your fourth or fifth studio.
mhm.
So what were your experiences in comparison, like, comparing those studios? I'm pretty sure you've been to other studios after Yoga Bliss. So like, can you give us a little bit of insight, your experiences coming to different studios? What are the things that made you feel like, oh, I like this
Yeah.
part? And what part did you feel like, okay, you know what, this could get better?
Yeah. Um, let's say it was like inviting. Your studio was very inviting, especially like I feel like a lot of the other studios I went to, it was the regulars, and the regulars kind of had like everyone kind of was very social, like the regulars, but then it was still felt a little bit like outsidish, like, oh, this person's new, not really a regular sort of environment. I don't know if that makes sense. And so like how when I walked into your studio, it was like I felt like a regular, even though it was like my first time. Like the first class I took was with Lada, and like I remember after Lada came up to me and she was just like talking. She's like, "Oh, you should try this class," and then blah blah blah. And I was like, "All right, like I'll give it a go." And then I met your class. I was like, "Oh, like this is a lot of fun, and like this works way better with my schedule." And so like, it was just very inviting and very just like I said, it was just like warm and inviting, like walking in and then being, the way everyone spoke to me from the very first interaction was just like, "Oh, like I like this."
So do you think that could be like one of the reasons why men tend to get intimidated in coming to a yoga class? Like that lack of invitation, or that making you feel welcome? I,
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. I had this conversation with another guest, and that lack of, I don't know, interaction, maybe, if you will,
Yeah.
because it kind of felt like high school,
Yeah,
right?
very
Because I've been,
clicky.
a Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So do you think that plays a part?
I think it's multiple things, honestly, because like I think they're like both internal to the studio and then also internal to ourselves. Like internal to the studio, it's clicky or whatever. But then also to myself, like I'm very like I'll be honest, like I was also cautious of like going up to people because it's like this is like you are still aware as a guy in
My
like a room
God.
full of women. Like I'm not just about to go talk to a randomly who are gonna think I'm only here to hit on them. And it's like I'm actually not, like believe it or not. And so like you're like aware of that of like how do I like, hey, like I'm just here to like meet new people, but like in a pure platonic, like I'm just looking for people in the community to talk to, like and like to really like like people have their previous experiences, so they're gonna have their things that you're kind of fighting against. It's not just like you're not starting with a clean slate ever, and so like I think a lot of it is like being aware of that and kind of holding back some as well. So. And I think in to the stigma of like it's mainly woman, like it is mainly woman in the room. So just going to talk to a group of women who are already in their clique talking to people, I would consider it like going out on the weekend and talking to it like you're trying to inject into a closed group of women and you're a guy and it's like, no, I'm not doing that. So yeah, yeah.
So if you like, because I know you obviously, so this is kind of like a little biased because I know a lot about you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So for a male
Mhm.
practitioner that, it didn't really bother you to be part of that community, regardless of
Mhm.
gender. But to those men who are experiencing that, what advice or tip at least that you can give to men who thinks that yoga is for just like, so feminine and I don't want to do that? How do you help men shift that mindset and then kind of encourage them and remove that misconception and kind of help them get to the practice?
I think you just like I just tell people like remove all that noise. Yoga's for you. Like it's for you and you alone. Like it's not for anyone else other than you. Like just that's the end of it. Like period. There's not much more to add to it. So if you're going and you're worried about other people, you're worried about, that oh it's mainly women here, then you're missing the point, in my opinion, because like you should see yoga as a form of like self-discovery or like as a form of, trying to just learn more about yourself, and it shouldn't matter like like those external factors shouldn't matter at all because they're not a part of the journey of you finding yourself through the practice.
Try to play a game with me
Mhm.
here. Like if you were like try to put yourself in a man's
Mhm.
shoes that experiencing
Mhm.
that or highly functioning from like societal
Mhm.
programming and have that intense like, none of my male friends do
Mhm.
this and then I do this and this person to the core like inside really wants to try it but because of that societal pressure and a peer pressure, don't do it. So what would you tell that person?
Sure. Oh, that's interesting because, like, my philosophy lately is like you can't tell anyone anything to do something until they're ready to do it themselves. So, like, honestly, like, what could I tell them? I've my current perspective of things is like all I could say is, what helped me or like what got me there. But at the end of the day, like, it was honestly me kind of hitting that rock bottom that even got me there. So, like, if anyone told me anything, and like probably wouldn't have helped me anyways until I got to that point where I was ready for it and I was ready to receive it or I was open to it. And so like, like and I tell people like regularly, like, hey, you can learn the hard way or you can learn the easy way. And so, but the problem is like most people need to learn the hard way. But like people don't really want to learn the easy way. So if I say like, hey, you go to yoga, like your life's gonna change, like you're gonna learn things about yourself you would have never thought you needed to learn about yourself. The reality is not everybody wants to learn those things about themselves. Like that's one thing I've realized. And so it's like, okay, if you don't want to learn those things about yourself, then I'm not going to force you to learn them about yourself because it's not a fun process all the time and it's not an easy process. So if you're not up for it, then don't do it. And it's really just like if you're right, because it is a scary process, and it's a heavy thing to want to discover really what's going on internally and really understand yourself. Like it's not, it's not an easy thing to do. And so, like I don't know, like if someone was like, hey, I want to try this, and then I guess my comments then would be like, are you sure you're ready? So like, are you sure you're ready to do that? Like, or do you feel like you're ready to actually do that? Why or why not? And depending on what they would say is I then would dictate, like if they say no, I'm not ready because I don't want to go down that road. Okay, then I'll leave you alone. Or if it's like, hey, I don't want to go down there, I don't want to do that because I'm scared. Well, if you're scared and you want someone there with you, I'll go with you. Like, why don't you come with me and I can help you through it. So and it gets very like I feel like it's right. It's not black or white. Nothing's black or white, but it's like it all depends on the scenario, depends on the person, depends on where the person is in their journey, where they are in their life, what they're seeking, where their, mental capacity is. Like it's like so many factors and like what I would do. A lot of people who I work with, I tell them like, hey, you should just come try a yoga class, see how you like it. I've gotten people to come out. Some of them just do one class and that's it. Some of them will come here and there. They're kind of scattered. And it's like, okay, well, at least you're trying. I never, like, I've kind of given up on not given up. It's just I've had more patience with letting people do what they want to do and not me trying to convince them or persuade them to do something that they're clearly not ready to do yet because it's a heavy thing to go on and it's not for
Absolutely.
everyone.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. I agree with that. And uh this like that phrase, what is it called? Like wisdom will come to someone who is ready to listen
mhm.
or learn.
Yes,
So I think that's what you're trying to say.
yes.
Like if you do not have that internal desire or an openness at least to learn new things or to take an advice, it doesn't matter how flowery or fucking poppies and rainbows someone say. It just gotta go out there like, you're on crack. Okay. You
Right.
know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So with your so with your practice, because you've been practicing for a while
Mhm.
now, um, from your personal experiences, how do you think the practice helped you or helping you, beyond the mat, beyond being at an hour, yoga class?
Yeah, I would say like um it just connecting with just staying connected to myself, honestly. It's one, it's very humbling. A lot of times it helps me just stay grounded. It helps me realize when I'm pushing too hard. It helps me realize when I can push a little harder. It helps me realize when I need to reassess things. It helps me stay calm, as I run my own business. I deal with a lot of people. I deal with a lot of personalities, and it really puts things in perspective of like, there's a huge mental component, and you realize, okay, like a lot of things, especially dealing with people in general, business is people. So if you want to be good at business, you have to be good at people. That's just like, it's just a fact at this point. And there's just so many personalities, like, right, there's over a billion, is 8 billion something people in the world, and they each of them have their own experience, their own personalities. And like, even what I said, like at the beginning, when you're dealing with someone, you're not dealing with with them in the moment. You're dealing with all of their past as well as like who they are showing up to you in the front. So you're not starting with a clean slate ever. You're always starting with their past, like who you're now coming into as in the present. And so yoga is just like has really just kept me really just grounded and in the present and the like, hey, here's where we are now. Here's what the present is. And even sometimes I have to remind people, like, I understand whatever happened in the past, but this is now. And like, let's focus on now and what we can do now and how we can solve this problem now, or what is it we need right now. And so yeah, I mean, like you always said it, like yoga doesn't start and end at your mat. It's literally like it's part of your life at a certain point. Like everything is yoga, staying grounded with your breath, like all these things. It's just it really applies to your everyday life.
I have a question there. So you said when you're dealing with other people,
Mm,
you're a business owner, so
nice.
there's a lot of pressure there, out of different personalities and histories that you have to deal
Mhm.
with on a day-to-day basis. So you said yoga helps you kind of create a clear perspective or approach,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? So my question is, when you're dealing with someone, how do you effectively, either directly or indirectly, help someone come back to the present moment when their past identity or programming or other things, the scattered thought. Because when you're overwhelmed, things get scattered and you lose perspective,
Right.
right? So, how do you deal with that? Being like a business owner, that's a lot of
Yeah.
work. So, what do you do? How do
Yeah.
you effectively approach that?
Well,
I hope you're enjoying this episode. And as we all know, yoga is more than just poses, right? It is truly about connection. And if you're a yoga teacher struggling to keep students engaged and build a loyal community, I've got something for you. You can grab my free guide, 3 pro tips to pack your classes and learn how to create a welcoming space, guide flows with confidence, and leave a lasting impact that keeps students coming back. You can get it now at 3stepyoga.julesadulo.com and start teaching with more connection and ease. Now back to the episode.
for better or for worse, like, like because of my background, like I'm really good at identifying, when people are triggered or people out of their window and things like that. And so like it's really easy for me to stay grounded and kind of not right. It's easy if someone gets triggered, and you see this a lot in business. Someone gets triggered, they get aggressive, they get screaming, and then immediately that triggers the next person, and then it just spirals out of control. So whenever I'm in a situation where I see someone clearly like just off the chart, this is me, I'm calm. I'm not going to elevate. I'm not going to meet them. I will easily say, hey, I'm going to walk away right now. We'll come back and talk about this. Like, hey, you're screaming. Please stop screaming. And I'm very clear on either you stop and we have a conversation or I'm walking away. And like, I don't care if it's the biggest deal I could have. If you're not going to be respectful, I don't want your money, period. And I think just having those boundaries in place of like, in staying grounded and staying true to like who you are, honestly, I think is why I've been doing so well. It's because it's not common practice in business where everything is normally like cutthroat and like you got to deal with this. Like, no, I'm not doing it. Like, this is me. I value my peace, and no dollar sign is worth me sacrificing my peace. So we could,
I know.
if we could talk about it, we can come to an agreement. But what we're not going to do is belittle anyone or act like a child, act like children. I'm not doing that. So,
Thank you for saying that. Like, that's
yeah.
beautiful. That's actually beautiful. I think there's this misunderstanding between being nice and being kind.
Mhm.
I feel like being nice or too nice is a reflection of a trauma response,
Yes.
which is, textbook,
Yeah.
the people pleasing. We all have that,
Right.
right?
Yes.
We gone through that.
Yes.
But being
Yeah.
kind, there's like, you can be
Mhm.
kind, but have
Mhm.
boundaries. And for as long as you understand where you stand and you're grounded enough, whether you lose a deal, if it's not worth it, you kind of like balance those things, right? I think it all boils down to what you value the
Yes.
most. And for
Yeah.
you, it's very clear your peace is at the top of the
Yes.
priority. So that helps you stay grounded and approach things from that place of peace. Like, it's either you're gonna calm down and we're gonna approach this as adults,
All
or
right. Yeah.
we just walk
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
right? So, and
Exactly.
it's tough because it's business, right?
Yeah.
It's always about the numbers,
Right.
and that kind of gets a little muddy sometimes.
Yeah.
So for men that are, this is tough because I'm a female and I have a tendency to just like say shit. I don't want to like men go after me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll vouch for you. You're good.
So I'm gonna be
You're good.
so there is this image of men for however long we've been existing on this planet that men have to be a certain way. Men have to be providers.
Yeah.
Men have to be
Yeah.
strong. Men have to do this. It's almost like an endless task for
Yeah.
men to be something.
Yes. Yeah.
So I want to talk about shifting the mindset and creating space for vulnerability to be present in men's world. From your perspective, how would you shift that perspective if you are talking to a room
Mm,
full of
mm,
men? You don't know their backgrounds, but we all have universal experiences,
mm.
right? So how would you shift that mindset that would land to men, to this room full of men that are like, you know what, I'm ready to fight all the time. Things like that. Like, how do you create uh, an approach where men would be more like, oh, I get that.
Mm.
It's okay. I can accept that, and I can create space for that part of myself in my life.
Yeah, see that's one of those like you have to be ready for this conversation, sort of thing. Like men have to be ready to hear this. And I think this is one of those parts that started very early on in childhood. And it's funny, I was just talking recently to someone about this. And in growing up, like it's almost nature. And like, I realized this recently. I was like, growing up, like my grandfather had passed away when I was young, and my grandmother, right, leaving my grandmother as a widow. My mother and father got divorced, and then I was like six or eight around that age. Then I became the man of the household. Like I didn't even think about it. It's just like, oh, my dad's not here anymore, so now like I have to, look after my sister and my mother. And I was a kid. Like no one told me that. It was almost like it was in my DNA to just know, like, hey, now you're the man of the house. Like it's your job to take care of these things. Um, and so like it's almost like it is so primal, like it's just primal instinct to want to do that and to want to be that protector and provider for women. And and for men to understand, like there's nothing wrong with that. We'll want it to be the provider and protector, but there's healthy ways of doing it. And then I feel like society, especially today, it's a very unhealthy way of the way it's glorified. And I really think it's just talking to men and trying to help them get to the root. Like, hey, why do you feel that way? Or like, why do you think that this is the way it is? And asking that why question a lot. And then when you get to the root of it, it's, I feel like the only way I'm going to be loved is if I am this provider and protector. And really, I think that's what men want. They want to be loved. And, a lot of men, they're not loved unconditionally. Generally always loved with some sort of condition, and they don't know what it feels like to be loved just for who they are. I would say the vast majority of men have no clue what it feels like to be loved for just being the person who they are, sadly. And I don't think they realize that because it's so natural of like, no, I have to do this if I want to be loved or if I want someone to even give me attention. And that's just the way society is, honestly. Like it's enforced by women time and time again. So it's like they're not wrong in thinking that way because it is kind of true that it is that way. But I don't think women realize that either. Like you do realize you only love men based on what they can do for you. That's it. You don't give, especially in the Western society now, like where everything is about money or whatever. Vast majority of women are looking for men who have, a certain amount of money and who look a certain way who can protect them. They don't really care much about the man's character or who he is as a person or like, the struggles he's had in his life. No, they just care about what they can do for him, what he can do for her now. And even that's primal. Again, that's primalistic, right? Women need to feel protected. They want to feel it. But again, overcoming that, like helping men realize like, hey, you're not wrong for feeling the way you feel. However, you need to understand why you feel the way you feel and try to address it and fix it. Because I feel like a lot of that anger in men is due to that lack of love that they experience because they haven't met the conditions that are needed to have love in today's society. But once you realize you
Cool.
can love yourself, you don't need external love, then it kind of is like, it changes. Because now you realize you're not angry anymore. Now you're more compassionate with yourself because you love yourself and you appreciate yourself. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether you want to admit it or not, no one can give you something you can't give yourself. So if you can't give yourself that love and compassion, then you can't expect anyone else to give it to you. And so,
That's loaded. All right. For women that are listening, let me just put this in perspective. Okay. So we all have our primal conditioning, if you
yes.
will. We like for centuries, we were placed in a position that we didn't really have a say about, right? And what Codrington is saying is like, he's not saying that women are demanding
Mm.
this from men, because if that's the argument, then we all know from a woman's perspective, men demand a lot of
Mm.
things from
Yes.
women. And for centuries, women never had a voice, a chance. That's why women are so empowered in this new generation, because now we have a voice, right? So so I'm thinking about what you said. The angry man is just like not understanding who they are, right? And also haven't experienced that love. And what would you say? I don't want to take this in like a whole different road, but I just want to touch base with this. So an angry man and putting it in a unit with a woman or a partner, right? So if this angry man just wants to be loved, and then now there's this, let's say, an unconscious expectation to get that love from another human being, from a partner, without dealing with his own internal battles, not because he didn't want to, but he just didn't have the tools to do that. It just doesn't
Yeah.
exist. How would you approach that situation? Like, for example, you're the
Mm.
guy, you're an angry
Mm.
guy, and in your heart, there's that vulnerable side of you that just wants to be loved, but you don't know how to ask for that love. And but you're expecting it
Mm.
in the back of your head to get it from your partner. So if you're in that place, how would you give yourself a chance to understand where that is coming from
Mm.
when you don't even realize it? Like, you don't have the tools. So how would you create a path for yourself so you can create a healthy, loving relationship with another human being?
Yeah.
Because I think it's tough to say that, men just, angry or,
Mm.
you know, out, if you
Yeah.
will, because they haven't felt love,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
And then they're just looking for that. So I don't know if this is making
It
sense. I
is.
feel
I
like I'm
think
rambling.
no, I think I understand what you're saying. And again, I think that goes to the part of like self-love, right? So you have an angry man who wants someone to love him because he's incapable of loving himself. But no one can love you unless you can love yourself, because only you can tell or show someone how to love you, right? So you're expecting someone to do something that for you that you don't even know how to do for yourself. Like it's not possible. Like it's almost impossible. And so, like I can't say, right. And that was part of my journey too, was understanding, right. A lot of people don't want to admit that there's parts of themselves that they don't love. And that's a hard pill to swallow, to say like, hey, I don't love this about myself. Like that's a really hard, like it's tough. Like, it sucks because it's easy to say, I don't like this, I don't like that, until you're talking about yourself and you're looking in the mirror and you're saying like, I don't like this and I don't like that. And that's one step. That's only one step though, is to admit what you don't like about yourself. And then that just starts the wheel, kind of spinning. What really gets it going is like when you start to dig and understand why you don't like those parts of yourself. And so it's one step of saying, I don't like this about myself. My hope is, it's almost like, I don't like these things about myself. I don't love these things about myself, but I'm hoping I find someone who does. And it's like, no, you're not going to find someone who loves these parts of you if you don't even love these parts of you. That makes no sense. And so, like a big part of my journey, honestly, and again, I'll be honest, like I hit rock bottom. Like I was going through a really nasty divorce. I almost lost everything. And it was like, what is going on? Why is this happening to me? Like I've been this ideal person, and here I am, like pretty much crumbling. And then I realized how much I like, there was so many parts of me I just did not like. And, and it's like, how can I expect people, right? And that's where the people pleasing comes in, because you feel like you're not worthy of love because of all these things you don't like about yourself. And so you figure, oh, right, that's your trauma response. Your protection is, well, if I behave this certain ways, then I know I'm unlovable because of these things that are on me. And that's a definition you put on yourself. You decide you're unlovable. So you say, okay, if I behave this way, then people will love me because I will treat them in a way. It's very manipulative, honestly, but it's, you're telling people, I'm going to treat you the way you want to be treated so that you love me. And because I don't love myself versus I love myself. This is who I am. Either you love me or you don't. This is how I treat myself because I love myself so much. This is the standard I hold to myself. That's another thing. People want to hold people to a higher standard than they hold themselves. Like you cannot do that. Either you hold yourself to this standard and you expect people to be at this standard, or you want to be down here. Whatever. You cannot be down here, expect in terms of your standards for how you treat yourself, how you love yourself, or whatever, and then expect someone's standards to be up here. No, that's a complete mismatch, not happening. And so yeah, like people need to learn to love themselves. Like you're angry because you don't love yourself, and you need to understand why you don't love yourself so you can heal those parts and really begin to love yourself and treat yourself the way you want to be treated. Like, like that's it. And I know it sounds simple. It's not. That's why I'm like,
Oh, it's
it's
not.
not an easy process. It's not an easy process. Like I've been at this, man, like I don't know, going on 3.5, 4 years at this point, and like there's so much that I'm still learning about myself, and I'm still like growing. But it's like you have to start at some point. You have like the sooner you start, the sooner you'll get there. But it's going to be a long process regardless. So.
Accepting vulnerability and growth and, really making a stand to like, you know what? I don't need to fit in a fucking societal expectation. Do you think that by doing so, it helped you in your life challenges as far as being a business owner, a father, partner, all kinds of relationship that you have in your life? Do you think this helped you by creating space for that vulnerability and, the openness to growth?
Yeah, I would say ultimately yes. Right at first, I'll say it becomes a very isolating, lonely process. Like you will lose, essentially, like you have to let your old self in your old life essentially disappear. Like, it's definitely the death and the rebirth in that, like, you literally just have to essentially let your old self die. You're going to lose a lot of friends. You're going to lose a lot of, like, I think a lot of things are just going to fall away, and you have to be ready for that. And so at first it seemed, like, gloom and doom and like, this is the worst thing ever. Like I can't do this. And honestly, that's probably where a lot of people cave and just go back to the old lifestyle because that's what's familiar to them. But ultimately, like the further you get on the journey, you realize you start meeting like-minded people. Like I met you, like I've like then the quality of people who I've met like over the last couple years, honestly, just over the last year alone has just been like such quality people that's like I would not have ever met these people had I not gone through what I've gone through. So yes, I would say short term it may not seem like it's worth it, but long term, like if you trust the process, I feel like it is like it's so worth it. Like it's just so peaceful and you gain so many quality, much fewer, but much higher quality people in your life who you really appreciate and admire.
I totally agree with that. But by the way, do you have a dog?
Yes, I do. Wait.
Okay. I was like, I thought I saw, like, I got distracted. I was like,
Yes,
I see something
yes,
there. I
that's my dog.
didn't know that. Okay.
Yes,
Anyways,
yes.
oh, here, this is just my way of going to this topic. The topic of
Uh,
ego. As we know, that is always present. There's really always getting that.
yeah.
So I think men and women have this too. I just want to make this clear to everyone listening that we do understand, right? In this conversation, me and Codrington, we do understand that we all possess the same universal experiences. So in this episode, I want to just talk about ego in men and how that helped you personally by being in this yoga path that you have and how you integrated that in your life. Because we know ego is always there.
Mm.
So the letting go, because men always like competitive, that competitive sense, right? Like, I gotta win, bro. Like, I gotta win this warrior too. So, so I'm this chair coach, you can get low, things like
Right.
that. So just kind of understanding that and how you integrated that in your life, whatever it is that you learned by being on this path, not just a yoga path, but your own journey,
Yes.
right? This self discovery and growth and acceptance. So just kind of give us a little bit of insight in that.
Right. It's funny because every time I bring like someone new to yoga, they're always like, because I always take them to like a vinyasa, like some sort of high power yoga. And so they always like, that was not what I was expecting. And I'm like, yeah, right. It's very humbling. I remember like today, the class I did today, and I don't know why I decided to work out yesterday because today, like I was not, today, my body was just like, nope. I was like, it's like, nope, like you gave it all yesterday. You don't have much left in your tank today. And so like I was barely keeping up today. And so like it's very humbling, but I mean it really makes you check in, right? I know so many people, especially men, who get injured at the gym, working out, lifting weights or whatever, because it's like you're not listening to your body, right? It's about like, I'm gonna do more weight. But can your body handle more weight right now? It's not to say you can't handle more weight, but can you handle it right now? Like there's days when I can push, and there's days I know when there's days I know when I'm being lazy and I'm not trying to push. There's days when I know, no, my body literally cannot push today. And then there's days when like I know my body is like, hey, let's do it. Like we're gonna go all in today. We're gonna push. And like you have to be able to understand what's going on internally to know which one of those three you're in. Because I feel like a lot of times men are like, they think they're always in the, no, we're going to push today. Like today's a day we're going to push. And it's like, are you sure today's a day you're going to push? Are you sure it's not a day you want to rest, or it's not a day you want to, pull back some? And I think that's that humbling part. Like, uh, that being comfortable, again, you're going to the studio to connect with yourself. It doesn't matter if everybody else is keeping up with the instructor and you need to be in child pose today. That's just where you are today. There's going to be times when everybody else is in child pose and you're going to be following the instructor. So like, it's not always going to be the way that you're used to winning. And you have to understand that, and you have to accept that and understand that drive. Where's that drive of always having to win coming from? And what are you sacrificing in that? You have to understand, like, you're going to be sacrificing your health by doing that. So yeah, I don't know if that answered it.
Yeah, it answered it, but I want to now ask the integration of that in your life
Mhm,
as a father, as a business owner, as, just a
mhm.
day to day life. How are you applying that to the interactions that you
Yeah,
have with yourself and with
yeah,
others? And I just want to like see, like, do you have like a specific time where you're like, you felt your ego kick
yeah.
in, or better yet, your ego was all over the damn place. It's taller than you and your tall ass guy. And then later, the later time, you're like, oh, light
Yeah,
bulb. That was that giant ego got going on. So can you give us a little bit of example or life experience, really?
yeah. Um, okay, where do I
No.
start? I say, where do I start? Right? And I tell this, I'm honest with you, hey, I'm not perfect. I am not perfect. I mess up. I have to repair. I have to like fix things all the time. I have to and metaphorically, I have to put my ass in child pose a lot. Like in
I love me too.
in real life. As a dad, like especially as a dad, right? Like of twin boys, they're gonna be 7 this year. And I mean, keeping up with them, there's times where I'm like, I can't do this with you guys. Like, boy, you guys are gonna I need to go take a little rest for a minute. Like, and then I'm gonna come back and then we can play the next game you guys want to play. But like, I need a break. Like, I can't do this right now. And then even with work, and that's honestly the work one I struggle with a little bit. But like, in terms of taking on too much sometimes, like there are times where, I will take on more than I should. And I say, okay, you were too optimistic in that, like you took on way more than you should have. You need to call a client, or you need to call someone and say, hey, I'm going to push yours back a week. If you committed to four, call all four of them and see which of them you can push back a week, which one you can push back 2 weeks. And right, that's just again, you become full of yourself at some point. Sometimes you have to check yourself and say, hey, you're only human. There's only so much you can do, but you can't. And it's really difficult. I would say definitely like, in Western society, especially in like, dealing with businesses, is being that person. I've realized like early in my career that like a lot of times deadlines are BS. Like a lot of times people will say like, hey, I need this by Friday, and it'll sit on their desk for another 2 weeks before they even look at it. And you just, work 60 hours to get something to someone that's going to sit on their desk for another 2 weeks. So like I really gotten pretty good at kind of pushing back and saying, are you sure you need it? Are you sure that's when you need it? Or like, do you need, or can I push this to this week? And most times they're like, yay, yeah, sure, that's fine. However, sometimes I forget to do that and then I'll overcommit myself. But then usually if I just go back and say, hey, you think we can let's talk about that schedule? And then usually they're open to it. So yeah, there's a lot of times. There's times when I'm like, dysregulated or whatever, like whether it's, dealing with I do get dysregulated sometimes dealing with customers, especially when you told them the same thing 10 times or 20 times. And then it's the same exact, like, guys, I've told you this plenty of times. You're not listening to me. I'll tell it to you a different way this time. Maybe you listen to me this time. So like, there are definitely times when like you catch yourself, like you just have to be aware and reflect and say, okay, I did this. How can I handle it better next time? Or how can I avoid doing this next time? Because like you're going to mess up, but it's just acknowledging when you messed up, how you messed up, and then trying to prevent you yourself from doing it again, in the future. So
Do you avoid or at least minimize dwelling on the things that you felt like you didn't do right or when you overcommitted, like how do you manage that? Because I think that's very universal. We all dwell, you know, with the things that we have done. To me personally, I have this it's a VHS tape actually. It's old school. Like that keeps rewinding in my head
yeah,
about the things that, like you have those moments when you dwell on certain
yeah,
things. Oh, I should have done that. I should have never done that or said that or things like that. So
yeah.
how do you manage that? And if you are have minimized that, like, do you create space for that? Do you give yourself like a timeline and then be like, okay, I'm gonna, think about it for this X amount of time, and then I'm gonna let it go. I just do better next time.
I think it depends. For sure, it depends. There's some things that, right, and this goes back to yoga, like in just general, like, right, the past doesn't exist, nor does the future, only the present does. So, like, you can't change the past and you can't predict the future. So just be present. What happened in the past, whatever, deal with whatever the consequences of that was in the present, then move on. Right. But there are times where I am like, crap, like, you do get into those kind of like spirals. And then honestly, when that happens, I'll try to meditate or do something to clear my head to try to let it go. Or usually I'll try to figure out like, why am I holding on to this? Like I already know that this doesn't matter. So if I'm holding on to it, there's a reason why I'm holding on to it. And then, usually if you like, journal about it or something, usually you could kind of clear it out, at least enough to function again. But I think it's just being patient with it and trying to understand why you're dwelling on it rather than focus on what you're dwelling on, focus on why you're even dwelling on it. Like change your perspective and then try to
Mm.
understand that part of it. And then usually if you focus on why you're dwelling on that thing, like then it'll kind of pass through. So usually.
I like that. I like that. And even if it like doesn't, because we don't really like forget,
Right.
right? But at least you have a very different perspective about it, and it changes the
Yeah.
dynamic. It changes the relationship to the thought,
Yes.
and I like that a lot. And with your practice now, what does your practice look like now? Do you like regularly go to a studio,
And
or do you lean towards more on meditation or any other form of mindfulness?
well, definitely meditation. I try to do a yoga practice at night before bed with like some meditation. I go to the studio usually at least 2 to 3 times a week. I'll go to the studio. And like it varies. It's not like right. Sometimes I'm not religious about it, but I try to go. I try to go at least 2 to 3 times a week, and then I try to meditate every night. Uh, and yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. But I do like a lot of things too. So like, I have my hobbies, I have my yoga, I do rock climbing. I like going to the beach regularly. Like I literally just go to the beach just to like, I love being at the beach to just unwind and relax. I do like there's different things, right? Like I try to like treat myself to like, like a massage or something at least once a month to like, try to get rid of some knots. Like I try to do different things, regularly to try to like again, like my it goes back to what I said, like I try to show myself the love that I feel like I deserve, in that like I want to treat my body with the respect and love that I feel like it deserves. So I do the things that I do, even if it's like the food I eat, right? So like I make sure I'm not like just consuming, bad food or food that like I know my body's not gonna like. Do I splurge every now and then? Of course, like you got to do it. But like on a regular basis, like most of the stuff in my house is like very healthy, and like I try to like focus on like all aspects of my life because right, and I don't know, a lot of this happened like when I after I had kids. Actually, yeah, a lot of it did happen after I had kids. Like right, I like I can't. I've never been a person of the like do as I say, not as I do. So I've always been like I want my boys to learn from example, not from me telling them, right? So how can I tell them don't eat sweets or junks if they see me eating sweets and junk? That makes no sense, right? How can I tell them, hey, we should be exercising and like staying active if they see me sitting around doing nothing, playing video games and never exercising? No, I make sure they see me exercising. I make sure they see me eating well. I make sure they see me taking care of myself. So that way they know, hey, and like these kids pick up on everything. Like they are like sponges. They just pick up on everything, right? So everything that I do, like they pick it up. So it's like I want to show myself the love. I want to show myself the love and respect I want my children to have for themselves. Uh, one day. And that's honestly been like that's kind of what makes sure I always stay like in my lane is like would I want the kids treating themselves this way or doing this to themselves? No, then don't do it to yourself. So yeah.
That's very a good a very good point because just to circle back to about men, and when men feel like they need to demand love because haven't felt it in their lives, from a partner and stuff like that. And I think it starts from that place, right? Because a lot of us really, everything that we're dealing with as an adult came from our
Mhm.
childhood, and it's this textbook thing, right? So, like, as a
Yeah.
parent, right? And that was a beautiful thing to say, like you have to be that inspiration for the kids, right? You have to be that person so they can create a life where they feel love and they find safety in their own
Yeah.
self. And everything that happens there just extends to the partner that they choose to have. And I think that's a very, very valuable thing to have. And having the awareness that you have, either through yoga and your own personal journey in mindfulness and all the things that you do to take care of yourself, because of these practices that you apply and integrate in your life, it made you a better father. It made you a better boss, and you're a great friend. I know that. Like, and we even like made a deal. Like, we're gonna check in on each other. We're
Yeah.
gonna make an effort on this shit.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
So I think, right. So it helps that connection because of that great mindfulness. So I think the takeaway there is for men that are iffy about that. If you're like going to look past that, oh, I'm the one to put my ass in the air, I'm not doing that, that kind of thing. I don't know why I did that, but I'm going with it. So, so you just look past that and look more like the depth of that mindfulness itself, even just with the awareness of the breath, it could take you to a path that is more loving, a little bit more calm. Because I think the core thing is safety. I think it's a great primal need. We just are looking for safety because we lack it for
Right.
so long.
Yeah.
So I think we need to give that to ourselves, right?
Yes.
And like you said earlier, it's not a fucking easy path,
No, it's not.
finding the safety shit.
But too, before I lose this thought, like yoga is also like in terms of like especially rock climbing, like so many people like lose like their breath when they're working out, when they're doing other activity, whether it's a sport or what have you. If it yoga does one thing that I would say it forces you to stay with your breath. And when you go into other activities, whether it's sports or what have you realize like why am I not breathing right now? Like why am I like hunched up like this or like gasping for air? Right? Like you start like, oh wait a minute, like my shoulders should be back, I should be breathing, I should be, it right. The poses that you do they're very applicable to like just your posture and just other things and like keeping with your breath and like, having a good like form just to make sure like you're optimal, like you're breathing optimally. And so like I think like a lot of people like they don't realize like how important that is in their like whatever physical activity they're doing in their life, whether it is like lifting weights or some high intensity sport. Like you cannot perform high if at a high level if you're not breathing correctly. Like your body literally like your body literally can't do it. Like we need oxygen. So if you're not breathing, guess what? You're not going to perform. So anyways, like I didn't want to lose that thought when you brought, because like it's so
No, it's
important.
beautiful
It's so
thought.
important.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you caught that
yeah.
thought. I was explaining it in the view, and I was like, "Fuck, I lost the train of my thought."
I know I would have. That's why I was like, I'm gonna have to say this because otherwise I'm gonna forget it. So yes,
Creating a community, I like putting every ADHD
I know,
people in
right?
one
You have
place.
to understand how your brain works. Like it's so important. You have to understand how your brain works. Otherwise, just forget it. Like it's not gonna work.
So we're almost at the end of this podcast from the perspective of men in this practice. So before we end, I want to give you a chance to maybe give a little bit of encouragement to men out there that are listening that are iffy, especially the ones in your industry and how they would help them, and just kind of give your 2 cents on that.
Yeah. Hmm. That's an interesting one. Um. Right. I think men. Right. Men need to understand. I guess in general that like you're not just the amount of money you make. You're not just like, actually, you know what? Let's do that. Let's say money didn't matter. Let's say you didn't care about anything else, right? And, and, and you generally, I feel like so many men are doing things for, just for the sake of money or just for the sake of being this, protector and provider. And I feel like they just think very literal, like protecting and providing, like providing, financial resources and protecting physically. Well, there's so much more to that than just those two aspects, right? Are you providing, a safe space and, are you providing a safe space mentally? Are you providing, spirituality? Are you providing like there's so much to relationships than just being physically fit and having money. And I think men need to realize that, and I think they need to learn more about themselves and be able to connect to themselves and be able to love themselves more so they can really find the love that they're looking for. Like there's so much, especially now, with just like women this way, women are this way, and there's no good woman out there, and blah blah blah. And it goes back to what I said. Like you can't expect something from someone that that you don't expect from yourself. So if you don't expect the love from yourself, you don't expect the respect from yourself, then you can't expect to find someone or have things that you're not doing for yourself. Yeah, I mean, I would say people just need to get more curious about who they are. Like they need to understand that they aren't their thoughts, they aren't their bodies. Like, these physical things that we buy, they don't like they're not going to bring you happiness. I think that's a big one I would tell men is like happiness doesn't, if you don't have happiness internally, you're not going to have any happiness by any external factor that you can purchase or what have you. It's just not going to happen. And so, I say more people should just spend more time internally and really understanding what's going on in order, if they really want to find love and happiness. I would say that like that should be where their focus should be going as much as possible.
Well, Codrington,
Yes.
thank you for your insight as a wonderful yoga practitioner
Yeah.
in this world, and I appreciate you being
Thanks
here,
for
my
having
friend.
me.
Thank you so
Like I'm honored. Like of course. Like when you asked me, I was like, absolutely. Like I'll do this. This is like one of our normal like catch up phone
I
calls.
know.
So like, yeah, sure.
I know, right? Actually, it's more filtered. We're more,
That's true. Yeah, that's fair. Uh, uh,
but thank you so much for
of
being here.
course.
And thank you for listening to Modern Yoga Talk.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everyone. That's a wrap for this episode, and thanks again for tuning in. And if you enjoy the conversation, make sure you show your appreciation. Follow us here, rate us, leave a review. It really helps the show grow. And if you want to keep the conversation going, you can connect with Modern Yoga Talks on Instagram and YouTube. And again, big thanks to our wonderful guest for being on the show. Check the description for offerings and ways to connect with our beautiful guests. Thanks again.